The scar that ran from Beatrice Logan's temple to her jawline had been called many things over her 22 years, but the word that haunted her most was the one her own mother had whispered on her deathbed: ruined. It was 1878, and the small Wyoming settlement of Green River had seen its share of hardship, but nothing prepared the townsfolk for the sight of a young woman who wore her past like a brand across her face. Beatrice stood behind the counter of the general store where she worked, her fingers sorting through bolts of calico fabric with practiced efficiency. The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows, illuminating the particles that danced in the air like restless spirits. She had learned to keep her scarred side angled away from customers, a subtle choreography she performed without thinking. Most people pretended not to notice, their eyes sliding away with uncomfortable politeness. Others stared openly, their curiosity mixed with pity or revulsion. The bell above the door chimed, and Beatrice looked up to see Mrs. Henderson entering with her daughter, Sarah. The older woman's lips pursed immediately upon seeing Beatrice alone at the counter. "Where is Mr. Patterson?" Mrs. Henderson asked, her tone sharp. "He is taking inventory in the back, madam. May I help you with something? We need thread and buttons for Sarah's wedding dress." Mrs. Henderson pulled her daughter closer, as if proximity to Beatrice might somehow taint the upcoming nuptials. "Sarah is marrying the banker's son next month." A love match, truly blessed. Beatrice felt the familiar ache in her chest but kept her expression neutral. "How wonderful! Congratulations, Miss Henderson." Sarah, who had once been Beatrice's childhood friend before the accident, could not meet her eyes. The fire that had taken Beatrice's home when she was 15 had also taken her parents and left her with a face that mothers used as a cautionary tale. She had survived by crawling through flames, her cheek pressed against burning floorboards as she searched for her younger brother. She had found him, pulled him to safety, and in doing so earned a permanent reminder of that night. "Some people are meant for love and family," Mrs. Henderson continued, examining spools of thread with exaggerated focus. "Others are meant for different paths. The Lord has a plan for everyone, even those who might not be suited for the traditional blessings of womanhood." The words landed like stones. Beatrice had heard variations of this sentiment her entire adult life. Too scarred for marriage, too marked for motherhood, too damaged for love. Her aunt, who had reluctantly taken her in after the fire, had said it plainly. "No man will want you now. You should be grateful for any opportunity to be useful." "I will get Mr. Patterson for you," Beatrice said quietly, retreating to the back room before Mrs. Henderson could see the tears threatening to spill. She stood among the crates and barrels, pressing her palms against her eyes, willing herself to breathe. 7 years since the fire, and still the words could cut so deep. She had built walls around her heart, convinced herself that solitude was strength, that independence was enough. But on days like this, the loneliness felt like drowning. "Miss Logan," Mr. Patterson's gruff voice broke through her thoughts. "Mrs. Henderson is asking for me." "Yes, sir." "I apologize." "Nothing to apologize for, girl. That woman could curdle milk with her disposition." He paused, his weathered face softening. "You all right?" "I am fine, sir." He did not believe her, but he was kind enough not to press. As he returned to the front, Beatrice heard the bell chime again, followed by a deep voice she did not recognize. "Afternoon, folks. I am looking for supplies and information in that order." "Well, you have come to the right place for both," Mr. Patterson replied. "What brings you to Green River?" "Work. Heard the cattle ranch outside town needs experienced hands. Name is Hayes Brennan." Beatrice found herself drawn to the doorway, peering through the gap. The man standing at the counter was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water in summer. His hat hung down his back by its cord, revealing sandy brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, and when he smiled at something Mr. Patterson said, Beatrice felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach. "The Morrison Ranch is always looking for good men," Mr. Patterson was saying. "They run about 5,000 head now, getting ready for the fall drive. You have experience. Been working ranches since I was 14. Spent the last few years up in Montana, decided it was time for a change." Hayes pulled out a list, his hand's work roughened but steady. "I will need basics to start. Tobacco, coffee, dried beans." As Mr. Patterson gathered the items, Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat meaningfully. "A new cowboy, how interesting. You should know, Mr. Brennan, that Green River is a respectable town. We have standards." Hayes turned to her with polite curiosity. "I would expect nothing less, madam. I am a respectable cowboy. See that you remain so. We have vulnerable young women here who must be protected from inappropriate attention." Something flickered across Hayes's face, a flash of irritation quickly masked. "I assure you, madam, I have no intention of bothering anyone. I am here to work, earn honest wages, and mind my own business." Sarah Henderson giggled, and her mother shot her a quelling look. Beatrice watched the exchange with a mixture of amusement and sadness. She knew Mrs. Henderson's definition of vulnerable young women did not include her. She was not someone mothers worried about protecting. She was already ruined, after all. Hayes completed his purchase and left with a friendly nod to Mr. Patterson. Beatrice returned to her work, trying to ignore the way her heart had responded to a stranger's smile that had not even been directed at her. The following Sunday, Beatrice attended church as she always did, sitting in the back row where she could slip out quickly if needed. Reverend Mitchell droned on about sin and redemption while the congregation shifted in their seats, fanning themselves against the late August heat. Beatrice's mind wandered to the week ahead, the inventory that needed completing, the order she needed to place with the wholesaler in Cheyenne. After the service, she walked toward the door, keeping her head down and her scarred side turned away. She had nearly made it to freedom when a voice called out, "Miss Logan, a moment please." She turned to find Reverend Mitchell approaching with a man she recognized from his ranch outside town, Mr. Howard Garrett. He was a widower in his 50s, thick around the middle, with small eyes that always seemed to be calculating. "Miss Logan," the Reverend began, his voice pitched for discretion but still audible to nearby parishioners, "Mr. Garrett has expressed interest in speaking with you about a matter of some importance." Beatrice's stomach knotted. She knew what was coming. "Miss Logan," Mr. Garrett said, his gaze fixed somewhere past her left ear, "I find myself in need of a housekeeper and someone to care for my 4 children. The youngest is only 3, and they need a woman's influence. I am prepared to offer marriage in exchange for these services. You would have a home and security. I believe, given your circumstances, this is a generous proposition." The words were delivered with all the romance of a business transaction, because that was exactly what it was. Beatrice felt every eye in the churchyard upon her, waiting to see if the scarred spinster would accept this charitable offer. "Mr. Garrett," she said carefully, "I am honored by your offer, but I must decline. I am quite content with my current situation." His face reddened. "Content? Working in a store for pennies. You are 22, Miss Logan. This may be your only opportunity for marriage and family." "Then I shall have to accept that," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Pride is a sin," Reverend Mitchell interjected. "Mr. Garrett is offering you a chance at respectability." "I have respectability, Reverend. I work honestly and live simply. I do not require a marriage of convenience to validate my existence." She walked away before either man could respond, her hands trembling and her vision blurred with tears. She heard the whispers starting behind her, the clucking tongues and knowing looks. Foolish girl, too proud for her own good. Who does she think she is? Beatrice did not stop walking until she reached the creek that ran behind the town, a place she had discovered years ago when she needed solitude. She sank onto a flat rock and finally let the tears come, great gasping sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the life she would never have, for the love that seemed destined to elude her, for the loneliness that wrapped around her like a second skin. "Seems like a fine day for crying," a voice said gently. Beatrice's head jerked up. Hayes Brennan stood a few yards away, his horse grazing nearby. He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I did not mean to intrude. I was just watering my horse and heard someone in distress. I can go if you prefer." She should have told him to leave. Instead, she found herself saying, "It does not matter. The whole town will be talking about me by supper time anyway." He took a few steps closer, his expression kind. "I do not mean to pry, but is there anything I can do to help?" "Unless you can change the entire world's opinion about what makes a woman worthy of love, I doubt it." Hayes was quiet for a moment, then sat down on a nearby rock, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I saw you at the general store the other day. You work there, right?" "Yes. Though after today I may need to find new employment. Small towns do not appreciate women who refuse generous offers of marriage." The man at the church, Beatrice looked at him sharply. "You were there." "Just arrived as folks were leaving. Heard some of the conversation. Seemed more like a business proposal than a marriage offer, if you ask me." "That is because it was." She wiped her eyes, suddenly aware of how she must look, her face blotchy and her scarred cheek surely prominent. "He needs a servant he does not have to pay. I need security and a home. According to everyone in this town, it is the best I can hope for." "Why is that?" The question was so simply asked, so genuinely curious, that Beatrice found herself turning to face him fully, letting him see the scar that dominated the right side of her face. "Because of this. I was in a fire 7 years ago. My parents died. I survived, but as you can see, not without cost. In case you have not noticed, Mr. Brennan, scarred women are not exactly desirable marriage prospects." Hayes studied her face with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but somehow did not. His eyes traced the path of the scar, from temple to jaw, then moved to meet her gaze directly. "I see a woman who survived something terrible. I see someone who is alive when they could have died. I see strength, not damage." Beatrice's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like this, had ever looked at her scar and seen anything but ruin. "You do not know me," she whispered. "No, but I would like to, if you would allow it." "Why?" "Because in the brief moment I saw you at the store, even though you were turned away, I noticed how gently you handled the fabrics, how you spoke kindly to the customer even though she was clearly being unpleasant. Because just now, you stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to accept a life you did not want. And because when you did turn around just now, I saw the most striking brown eyes I have ever encountered, and a face that tells a story of courage." Beatrice felt heat rising in her cheeks, a mixture of hope and fear warring in her chest. "People do not speak to me this way. Then people are fools." Hayes stood, extending his hand to help her up. "Would you allow me to walk you home, Miss Logan, or at least back to town?" She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, his grip gentle but sure. As he pulled her to her feet, she felt something shift inside her, like a door she had kept locked was suddenly creaking open. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, leading Hayes's horse between them. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landscape, painting the sagebrush gold. "Where are you from originally?" Beatrice asked, surprising herself with the question. "Texas, originally. My family had a small ranch there, but we lost it after the war. Been drifting since then, working where I can, trying to save enough to maybe start something of my own someday." "That sounds lonely." "It has been," he admitted. "But sometimes lonely is safer than staying in one place and watching everything fall apart around you." She understood that sentiment more than he knew. They reached the edge of town, and Beatrice felt a pang of disappointment that their walk was ending. "I turn here," she said, gesturing toward the modest boarding house where she rented a small room. "Miss Logan," Hayes said, his voice tentative, "would it be forward of me to ask if I might call on you, properly I mean, perhaps take you to dinner or for a ride?" Beatrice's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to say yes with every fiber of her being, but years of rejection and cruel words held her back. "Mr. Brennan, I appreciate your kindness today, truly. But you should know that calling on me will not do your reputation any favors. People will talk. They will say things. Let them talk. I am asking if you would like to spend time with me, not if the town would approve. You do not understand. They will say you are only interested because you think I am desperate or easy or that no one else would want me. They will make assumptions." Hayes stepped closer, his expression serious. "Miss Logan, I have been through this territory before, and I have never stopped in any town the way I found myself stopping here. I have never turned back to look for someone in a general store because I could not stop thinking about the grace and how they moved. And I have certainly never felt compelled to speak to a crying woman by a creek because her pain felt like something I needed to help heal. I do not care what people say. I care about what is true, and the truth is, I would very much like to know you better." Beatrice felt tears threatening again, but these were different. These were the tears of someone hearing words they had never expected to hear. "Yes," she whispered. "You may call on me." His smile was like sunrise, bright and full of promise. "How about Tuesday evening? I could borrow a wagon and we could take a drive out to the overlook. I hear the sunset from there is something to see. Tuesday would be lovely." As she walked to her room, Beatrice felt lighter than she had in years. But the fear still lingered, whispering warnings. "Do not hope too much. Do not believe too quickly. You know how this ends." Tuesday arrived with agonizing slowness. Beatrice moved through her work at the store in a daze, jumping at every sound of the door, though she knew Hayes would not arrive until evening. Mr. Patterson noticed her distraction but said nothing, though she caught him smiling to himself once or twice. At 6 o'clock, she returned to her boarding house and changed into her best dress, a simple blue cotton that she had sewn herself. She brushed her hair, pinning it back carefully to minimize the scar as much as possible, then stopped herself. Hayes had seen it. He had looked directly at it and still asked to spend time with her. Maybe, just this once, she did not have to hide. She left her hair as it was, swept back but not covering anything, and went downstairs to wait. Hayes arrived exactly on time, driving a neat wagon with 2 horses. He had clearly made an effort, his clothes clean and his hair combed, though it still curled rebelliously at his collar. He helped her onto the seat with old-fashioned courtesy, and they set off toward the western edge of town. "Did you have any trouble borrowing the wagon?" Beatrice asked. "None at all. The ranch foreman is a good man. When I told him I was taking a lady out, he practically insisted I use the best horses." They drove in easy conversation, Hayes telling her about his work at the Morrison Ranch, the other cowboys he had met, the vast herds that would soon be driven to market. Beatrice found herself relaxing, laughing at his stories, sharing her own observations about the townspeople and their peculiar habits. The overlook was everything he had promised. They arrived as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and deep purple. The valley spread below them, the green river winding through it like a silver ribbon. "It is beautiful," Beatrice breathed. "It really is." But when she glanced over, Hayes was looking at her, not the sunset. She felt heat creep up her neck. "Mr. Brennan." "Hayes, please call me Hayes." "Hayes," she corrected, liking the feel of his name on her tongue. "You should look at the view you brought me here to see." "I am looking at exactly what I want to see." It was such a bold statement, so plainly romantic, that Beatrice did not know how to respond. Hayes seemed to realize he had made her uncomfortable and quickly looked away, clearing his throat. "I apologize. That was forward." "No, it was kind. I am just not accustomed to kindness, at least not that variety." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun sink lower. Then Hayes spoke again, his voice quiet. "Will you tell me about the fire? Only if you want to. I do not mean to pry." Beatrice had never talked about it, not really. Her aunt had not wanted to hear the details, and no one else had ever asked with genuine interest. But something about the quiet evening and Hayes's steady presence made the words come. "It was November, 7 years ago. I was 15. We lived in a small house on the edge of town. My father was a carpenter, my mother took in sewing. My brother Thomas was 10. It started in the middle of the night, something wrong with the stove pipe, they said later. I woke up to smoke and heat and my mother screaming. She pushed Thomas toward me and told me to run. I tried to get them both out, but there was so much smoke. I could not see, could not breathe. I found Thomas hiding under a table, terrified. I grabbed him and started crawling toward where I thought the door was. There was a beam, fallen across the floor, and it was on fire. I had to drag Thomas over it. My cheek pressed against the burning wood, but I could not stop. If I stopped, we would both die. Her voice broke, but she pushed on. We made it out. Thomas had some burns on his arms and legs, but he lived. My parents did not. They found them together, my father covering my mother with his body, trying to protect her to the end, and I was left with this. She touched her scar lightly. A permanent reminder of the night I lost everything. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Where is Thomas now?" "He lives with our aunt, the one who took us both in." But when I turned 18, she made it clear I was expected to support myself. Thomas was still in school, still needed care. I was old enough to work. So I found the job at the general store and moved to the boarding house. I see him sometimes, but my aunt does not encourage visits. I think she finds me embarrassing, a constant reminder of tragedy. "You saved your brother's life, I know, but I could not save my parents, and I was left marked, damaged. My aunt told me right before I moved out that I should not expect love or marriage. No man wants a woman who looks like I do. She said I was unworthy of that kind of happiness, that I should focus on being useful instead." Hayes turned to her, his eyes blazing. "Your aunt was wrong, cruelty wrong." "She was practical," Beatrice said, though the words felt hollow. "No, she was cruel. There is a difference between honesty and cruelty, and telling a young woman she is unworthy of love because she survived a tragedy is the latter." He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself. "Miss Logan, Beatrice, if I may be so bold, you were told you are unworthy of love. Then I will spend my life proving you wrong." The words hung in the air between them, enormous and impossible and wonderful. Beatrice stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she had heard. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough. I know you are brave and kind and strong. I know you have survived things that would have broken lesser people. I know that when you smile, which you do not do nearly often enough, It feels like the sun coming out from behind clouds. And I know that I have been wandering for years, and the moment I saw you, something in me said here, this is where you stop wandering. Hayes, people will say terrible things about both of us. Then let them talk. I have never cared much for other people's opinions. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. I am not promising this will be easy. I am not even promising I know what I am doing. But I am promising that if you give me a chance, I will spend every day showing you that you deserve all the love and happiness in the world. That you are not damaged or unworthy or any of the other lies people have told you. You are extraordinary, and I would be honored if you would let me court you properly. Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. I do not cry this much usually. I promise I am not normally this emotional. Hayes laughed softly, reaching up to gently wipe her tears with his thumb. You can cry all you want. Happy tears, sad tears, angry tears. I will be here for all of them. Yes, she said. Yes, you can court me properly. Though I warn you, this town will make it difficult. I have faced down stampeding cattle and blizzards and men with guns. I think I can handle some gossip. They sat together as the last light faded from the sky, hands linked, talking about everything and nothing. Hayes told her about his childhood in Texas, about losing his parents to fever, about the years of wandering that had followed. Beatrice shared her dreams of someday having a home again, of maybe learning to bake the way her mother had, of not being afraid all the time. When Hayes finally drove her back to the boarding house, he helped her down from the wagon with careful hands. May I see you again? Perhaps Sunday after church. I would like that very much. He smiled, then hesitated. May I, that is, would it be all right if I? Beatrice understood what he was asking. She lifted her face, giving permission, and Hayes leaned down slowly, pressing the gentlest of kisses to her lips. It was brief and sweet and perfect, and when he pulled back, his eyes were shining. Good night, Beatrice. Good night, Hayes. She floated into the boarding house, her lips still tingling, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Mrs. Crawford, the landlady, met her in the hall with pursed lips. I saw you out there with that cowboy. People are going to talk, Miss Logan. Let them, Beatrice said, surprised by her own boldness. I have spent 7 years caring what people think. Maybe it is time I stopped. The next weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and genuine happiness. Hayes called on her regularly, taking her for drives, walking with her after she finished work, sitting with her at church despite the whispers and stares. The town did indeed talk, speculation running wild about the cowboy and the scarred woman. Some thought Hayes was after her money, though Beatrice had none. Others assumed more scandalous motivations. Mrs. Henderson declared it improper and unseemly. Mr. Garrett stopped speaking to Beatrice entirely when he saw them together, his face red with indignation at having his offer rejected for a common ranch hand. But Hayes never wavered. He was unfailingly courteous, always proper in public, but his eyes told her everything his words could not say in front of others. He was falling in love with her, and more miraculously, she was falling in love with him. One October afternoon, as they walked along the creek where they had first truly met, Hayes stopped suddenly. I have something I need to tell you, he said, his expression serious. Beatrice's stomach dropped. This was it, the moment where he would say he had been wrong, that he could not handle the scrutiny, that it was too difficult. All right, she said, bracing herself. The ranch is sending me on the fall cattle drive. We leave in 3 days and we will be gone for about 6 weeks. We are driving the herd to the railroad in Cheyenne. Oh, relief and disappointment warred within her. That is part of your job, I understand. I do not want to leave you, not now, not when we are just beginning, but the money is good and I have been saving. Beatrice, when I come back, I want to talk to you about the future. Our future, if you will have me. Her heart leaped. What are you saying? I am saying that 6 weeks apart will give us both time to think, to be sure. And if when I come back you still feel about me the way I feel about you, then I want to ask you something important. But I will not do it now. I will not ask you to promise me anything before I leave. You should have time to be certain. I am certain now, Beatrice said. Then you will still be certain in 6 weeks, and I will be able to ask you properly, with something better than empty pockets and dusty clothes. He pulled her close, right there by the creek where anyone might see, and kissed her with a passion that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Wait for me, he whispered. I will, I promise. The next 3 days were bittersweet. Hayes spent every free moment with Beatrice, and by the time he rode out with the rest of the drovers, the whole town knew they were serious. Beatrice stood at the edge of town, watching the dust cloud raised by 5,000 cattle, watching until she could no longer distinguish Hayes from the other riders. The weeks that followed were the longest of her life. She worked at the store, she attended church, she went through the motions of daily life, but part of her was always wondering where Hayes was, if he was safe, if he was thinking of her the way she constantly thought of him. Letters arrived sporadically, brought by riders going between the drive and various towns. Hayes's handwriting was rough but legible, his words simple but heartfelt. He wrote about the trail, the weather, the challenges of moving so many animals across the landscape. But mostly he wrote about missing her, about counting the days until he could return. Beatrice kept every letter, reading them over and over until she had them memorized. She wrote back when she could, sending her letters with anyone heading in the direction of the drive, knowing they might not reach him but needing to send them anyway. The town's attitude toward her began to shift slightly. Mr. Patterson, emboldened by Hayes's clear intentions, defended her more openly when customers made snide comments. The minister's wife, a kind woman who had always been quietly sympathetic, began inviting Beatrice to ladies' gatherings, treating her like any other young woman instead of a charity case, even Mrs. Henderson seemed to soften marginally, though she still maintained that the whole situation was irregular, but not everyone was pleased. One evening in late October, as Beatrice was closing the store, 3 men stumbled in, clearly drunk. She recognized them as ranch hands from a different spread than where Hayes worked, men with rough reputations. Well, one of them slurred. If it is not the scarred lady and her cowboy, except her cowboy is not here, is he? Gentlemen, we are closed, Beatrice said firmly, trying to keep her voice steady. Gentlemen, another mocked. She is calling us gentlemen. That is more respect than she shows herself, carrying on with Brennan the way she does. You need to leave. Now. The first man moved closer, and Beatrice smelled whiskey and unwashed clothes. What is the hurry? We just want to talk, want to know what a man sees in a face like that. Maybe if we get close enough, we will figure it out. Fear spiked through her, but before the man could get any closer, Mr. Patterson emerged from the back room with a shotgun. The lady said you need to leave. I suggest you do so immediately. The 3 men, drunk but not stupid, stumbled out into the street. Mr. Patterson locked the door behind them and turned to Beatrice. Are you all right? Yes, thank you. They were just drunk. Drunk and mean is a dangerous combination. I am walking you home tonight, and I am going to have a word with the sheriff about those men. Hayes would want me to look out for you while he is gone. Beatrice felt a rush of gratitude. You do not have to do that. Yes, I do. That young man of yours is one of the good ones, Miss Logan, and so are you. Some people in this town need to learn that respect is not determined by what you look like, but by how you act. You have always been respectful and kind, even when people did not deserve it. That cowboy of yours saw it right away. Rest of us should have seen it sooner. That night, lying in her narrow bed at the boarding house, Beatrice thought about Hayes's words by the creek. Then I will spend my life proving you wrong. He had already changed her life, had already shown her that she could be valued and wanted and cherished. But she realized it was not just Hayes who was proving everyone wrong. She was proving them wrong too, by refusing to accept their definitions of her worth, by opening her heart despite the fear, by believing she deserved more than a loveless marriage of convenience. November arrived with cold winds and early snow. Beatrice began to worry when she had not heard from Hayes in over a week. The drive should have reached Cheyenne by now. The men should be returning. Then, on a gray afternoon when the first real snowflakes were starting to fall, the door of the general store opened and Hayes walked in. He looked thinner, weathered by weeks on the trail, but his eyes found hers immediately, and his smile was radiant. Beatrice dropped the bolt of fabric she was holding and ran to him, propriety forgotten. He caught her up in his arms, lifting her off her feet, and kissed her right there in front of Mr. Patterson and two startled customers. "I missed you," he said against her hair. "God, I missed you so much." "I missed you too. I was so worried. We hit some weather near the end, got delayed a few days. I wanted to send word, but there was no way." He set her down gently, his hands framing her face. "Beatrice, I know I said I would wait, but I cannot. I have been thinking about this for 6 weeks, and I cannot wait another moment. Come outside with me," she nodded, grabbing her shawl. Mr. Patterson was grinning openly as they left. Outside, snow was falling more steadily now, dusting Hayes's hat and shoulders with white. He led her a little way down the street, to a spot where they had some privacy, then turned to face her. "I practiced this whole speech on the trail," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "But now that I am standing here, all I can think is how much I love you. How every day away from you felt like a year. How I would ride through 1,000 snowstorms if it meant coming back to you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Opening it, he revealed a simple gold band with a small pearl set in it. "It is not much," he said, "but I bought it in Cheyenne with my wages from the drive. The man at the store said the pearl means purity and new beginnings. I thought that was fitting, for both of us." He dropped to one knee, right there in the snow-covered street. "Beatrice Logan, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving to you and to everyone else that you are worthy of all the love in the world? Will you build a future with me, whatever that future holds?" Beatrice was crying again, but she did not care. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Hayes stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that made her forget the cold, the snow, everything but the feel of his arms around her and the promise of forever in his touch. They were married 3 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the church. Thomas, her brother, stood with them, grown taller and more mature at 17, grinning with joy for his sister. Mr. Patterson gave Beatrice away. Several of Hayes's fellow cowboys attended, along with a surprising number of townspeople who seemed genuinely happy for them. Mrs. Henderson came, though she sniffed disapprovingly at the speed of the courtship. Mr. Garrett did not attend, which Beatrice considered a blessing. The Reverend seemed uncertain about the whole affair, but performed the ceremony with proper dignity. When Hayes kissed his bride, sealing their vows, Beatrice felt something inside her finally heal. The scared, lonely girl who had been told she was unworthy of love was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her own value, who had found someone who saw past scars to the strength beneath. They moved into a small house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. Hayes continued working at the Morrison Ranch, proving himself so capable that within a year he was promoted to foreman. Beatrice kept working at the general store, saving her wages carefully. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and difficult summers, times when money was tight and work was scarce. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. Hayes never once treated Beatrice as anything less than his equal, his partner, his greatest treasure. 2 years after their marriage, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. The joy was tempered with fear, all the old insecurities rising up. What if her child was afraid of her face? What if she was not a good mother? Hayes held her through every worry, reminding her patiently that their child would know only love from her, that scars were just marks on skin, not measures of worth. Their son was born in the spring of 1881, a healthy baby boy with his father's eyes and his mother's determination. They named him Samuel after Hayes's father. When Beatrice held him for the first time, looking down at his perfect face, she cried tears of joy and healing. "He is beautiful," Hayes whispered, his arm around her shoulders, "just like his mother, Hayes. I mean it. Every word I have ever said to you, I have meant. You are beautiful. You are worthy. You are loved beyond measure." Samuel grew into a bright, curious child who loved nothing more than following his father around the ranch. When he was 3, Beatrice found herself pregnant again. This time, the fear was less, replaced by confident anticipation. Their daughter was born in 1884, and they named her Rose for Beatrice's mother. The family thrived. Hayes's skill and dedication eventually allowed him to buy a small piece of land, where he started building a herd of his own. It was modest compared to the Morrison Ranch, but it was theirs, built on honest work and careful planning. Beatrice stopped working at the general store when Rose was born, but she found other ways to contribute. She took in sewing, just as her mother had, and discovered she had a talent for it. Soon she had more work than she could handle, making clothes for half the town. The same women who had once whispered about her now praised her skill with needle and thread. They brought their daughters to her for wedding dresses, their sons for Sunday suits. Beatrice had become respectable not through a loveless marriage, but through her own capabilities and the love of a good man. Thomas visited often, now a young man making his way in the world. He had become a schoolteacher in a neighboring town, and he always credited Beatrice with inspiring his path. She had shown him, he said, that what matters is not what happens to you, but how you respond to it. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Hayes took Beatrice back to the Overlook where they had first truly opened their hearts to each other. The children were with Thomas for the night, giving them rare time alone. "You remember the first time I brought you here?" Hayes asked, his arm around her waist as they watched the sunset. "Of course. You told me I could cry all I wanted and you would be here for all of it. I meant it then. I mean it now. I know." She leaned into him, comfortable and content in a way she had never imagined possible. "Hayes, do you remember what you said to me about spending your life proving I was worthy of love? Every word. You did it. You proved it not just to me but to the whole town, to myself most of all." Hayes turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Beatrice, I did not prove anything. I just loved you the way you always deserved to be loved. The worthiness was always there. I just made sure you could see it." She kissed him, pouring 10 years of gratitude and love and joy into it. When they finally pulled apart, both smiling, Hayes rested his forehead against hers. "I have never regretted a single moment," he said. "Not one day, not one choice. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even when I burnt the biscuits last week," he laughed, the the sound rich and warm. Even then, though I will admit that was a challenging moment, they stayed at the overlook until the stars came out, talking about their children, their dreams for the future, the life they were building together, a life neither of them had expected but both had fought for. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. Samuel grew into a fine young man, deciding to follow his father into ranching. Rose proved to have her mother's talent with sewing and her father's head for business. She talked about opening a dress shop someday, and Beatrice had no doubt she would succeed. Hayes's ranch grew slowly but steadily. He earned a reputation as a fair boss and a skilled cattleman. Men wanted to work for him because he treated them with respect, remembering his own years as a drifting cowhand looking for honest work. Beatrice became known throughout the region for her sewing skills. She no longer hid her scar, no longer turned her face away from curious glances. The mark was part of her story, part of what made her who she was. Her children had grown up kissing that scarred cheek as naturally as the other, never seeing it as anything but part of their beloved mother. On a warm summer evening in 1891, 13 years after they had met, Hayes and Beatrice sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over their land. Their cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. Inside, they could hear Samuel and Rose arguing good-naturedly about something trivial. "We built something good here," Beatrice said softly. "We did, together. Do you ever think about that day by the creek, when you found me crying?" Hayes smiled, taking her hand. "All the time, I think about how close I came to not stopping at Green River at all. I almost rode right through, headed for the next town, but something made me stop. Some instinct that said this was where I was meant to be. I am glad you stopped. So am I. Best decision I ever made." He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her scarred knuckles, marks from years of hard work. "You know what I think? I think we were both wandering in our own ways. You were trapped in a town that had defined you by your worst moment. I was drifting, never putting down roots. And then we found each other, and suddenly we were home." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you, Hayes Brennan. I loved you when you first told me you would prove me worthy of love. I loved you when you came back from that cattle drive covered in trail dust and dropped to one knee in the snow. I loved you when you held our babies for the first time, and I will love you until my very last breath." "Well then," Hayes said, pulling her close, "I guess I will just have to keep proving you right for the rest of our lives." They sat together as the sky darkened and the stars emerged. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life on love and determination and unwavering faith in each other. The scars of the past had not disappeared, but they had been transformed from marks of shame into badges of survival, proof that love could indeed heal even the deepest wounds. Inside, their children called them for supper, and Hayes and Beatrice rose to join them, fingers intertwined, hearts full, their future bright with promise. The girl who had been told she was unworthy of love had become a woman who knew her true value. And the cowboy who had promised to spend his life proving her wrong had become the man who showed her what being truly cherished meant. In the end, they had both been right. Beatrice was worthy of love, had always been worthy. And Hayes had indeed spent his life proving it, not through grand gestures or empty words, but through the daily choice to honor, respect, and adore the remarkable woman he had found by a creek in Wyoming on a summer afternoon in 1878. Their love story became something of a legend in Green River, told and retold, especially to young people who felt lost or unworthy. The tale of the scarred woman and the cowboy who saw her true beauty became a reminder that love finds a way, that worth is intrinsic, not external, And that's sometimes the most powerful thing one person can do for another is simply to see them truly, completely, and without reservation. Years later, when they were old and gray, sitting on that same porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard, Hayes would still take Beatrice's hand and say, "Still the most beautiful woman I ever saw." And Beatrice, who had learned to believe him, would smile and reply, "And you are still the best decision I ever made." Their story did not end with wedding bells or even with the birth of their children. It continued in every sunrise they watched together, every challenge they faced as partners, every moment of joy they shared. It continued in the legacy they left behind, not just of a successful ranch or beautiful garments, but of a love that had defied expectations and transformed two wounded souls into whole, complete people. They lived long lives, Hayes and Beatrice, long enough to see their grandchildren grown, long enough to celebrate 50 years of marriage. And when the end finally came, as it must for everyone, they faced it as they had faced everything else, together. Hayes died first, in his sleep, in the winter of 1928. He was 74 years old. Beatrice held his hand through that last night, whispering all the words of love she had accumulated over 5 decades. When morning came and he was gone, she felt the loss like a physical wound, but she did not regret a single moment. How could she regret the greatest gift life had given her? Beatrice lived another 3 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her fiercely. She spent those years telling stories, passing on her skills, and making sure every young person who felt unworthy heard about the cowboy who had once told her he would spend his life proving her wrong. When she finally joined Hayes in 1931, at the age of 76, she went with peace in her heart and a smile on her lips. Her last words, whispered to Rose, who sat by her bedside, were simple and profound. "Tell them love is worth believing in. Tell them they are all worthy. Tell them to be brave enough to let themselves be seen." The story of Hayes and Beatrice became more than just a local legend. It became a testament to the transformative power of love, to the courage it takes to believe in your own worth, and to the extraordinary impact one person can have by simply choosing to see another person's true value. Their modest ranch continued under Samuel's care, eventually passing to his children. The house where they had raised their family still stands, maintained now as a reminder of the power of perseverance and love. Visitors come to see it, drawn by the story, and they leave reminded that scars do not define us, that worth is inherent, and that love, true love, sees past surface to soul in the end. Hayes had indeed spent his life proving Beatrice worthy of love. But more than that, he had loved her so completely that she finally learned to love herself, scars and all. And perhaps that was the greatest gift of all, not just being loved, but learning through that love to recognize your own invaluable worth. Their story reminds us that we are all worthy of love, that our wounds and scars and past traumas do not diminish our value, and that somewhere, somehow, there is someone who will see us truly and love us completely. We just have to be brave enough to let them, and brave enough to believe them when they do. Hayes and Beatrice proved that love is not about perfection, but about acceptance. It is not about finding someone without scars, but about finding someone whose scars fit with yours to create something beautiful and whole. They proved that the right person does not complete you, but rather helps you see that you were always complete, always enough, always worthy. And so their love story ended not with tragedy, but with triumph. Two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life of meaning and purpose, who had loved deeply and truly for over 50 years. In a world that so often tells us we are not enough, Hayes and Beatrice stood as eternal proof that love, real love, sees us exactly as we are and declares us worthy. Not worthy despite our flaws, but worthy including them, because every scar, every wound, every imperfection is part of the story that makes us who we are. Their legacy lived on not just in their descendants, but in every person who heard their story and found the courage to believe in their own worthiness, to open their hearts despite fear, to trust that love, when it is true, transforms everything it touches. Hayes Brennan had promised to spend his life proving Beatrice Logan worthy of love, and he had kept that promise until his last breath. But in doing so, he had given the world an even greater gift: proof that such love exists, that it is possible, and that it is worth waiting for, fighting for, and believing in with every fiber of one's being.